that reason, last week we decided to conduct a study hinging on the media studies that we normally conduct. It was really to understand, the mood of the country right now, which is one of the questions you, the media, have been asking us. Do Kenyans currently think the country is going in or headed in the right or wrong direction with all the things that have been happening? There are the macro things like the economic issues that are affecting the country, governance issues. There is also the issue of whether we've already gotten into electioneering mode with all the politicking that's going on, which you know better than I do. And then there are the social ills that are happening, the increased rates, as people would perceive, of incest, of, crimes of passion, where you see women are being murdered, families are being murdered, and so on and so forth. Suicide cases that we have also seen on the increase. And we therefore just went out to ask Kenyans what they thought generally about, the socioeconomic general environment and how that pertains to them. This study generally was conducted. I have the pointer, Derek. Okay. It was. Is it on? Okay. So what I then will cover with you today, there's so much we've covered, so you'll be seeing us for the next maybe 2-3 weeks, so that we can cover all the issues that we covered in the poll. But for today, we're generally going to look at 4 key areas. One is the country headed in the right or wrong direction? The last time we looked at it, it wasn't really headed in the right direction. Is that still the case? And what are the reasons for this? And who's responsible for the direction the country is taking? What is concerning Kenyans the most? Is it still corruption and high cost of living and economic issues, or governance and economic issues, or have things changed? We had the budget read on the 13th. And you reported it to us. And, the question then is of Kenyans, and I think government should want to know this, is are we satisfied with the budget? And if we're not satisfied with the budget, then how does government make things easy for us? Because we indeed are the taxpayers. And when all these things are happening, because we have legislation, then the question has often been, where is the opposition? Do we have an opposition? Is the opposition doing its job? And what we then link to that is, the popularity of the various political parties, so that we can actually see how people are feeling generally about the political parties, especially with the events of last week, when there was, talk of Jubilee splitting and new parties coming up as well. We've seen some people coming up with their own parties, governors also launching their own parties, and how that then will disenfranchise perhaps the bigger parties. Just some housekeeping issues. Just like I mentioned, the study was conducted between the 22nd and 23rd. That was last week. And it was conducted using computer-assisted telephone interviews. That is, using a call center where a database of respondents are called randomly throughout the country. And the sample was 1,048, giving us, a margin of error of 3% at 95% degree of confidence. What that means is that every figure you see here, you plus or minus 3, and the data is accurate at 95%, degree of confidence, which means 95 out of 100 times, if these respondents were asked the same question, they would actually answer it the same way. 5% of the time, they may change their mind. So in actual fact, then that gives us confidence that the data in itself is sound. Of course, the sampling was done using Kenya National Bureau of Statistics to help us, design the sampling frame. And the data was analyzed using SPSS, and so then that is the sample, which is proportionate to size of adult population in Kenya, so that if you see 8% for the coast, that is actually the percentage of the population for coast overall. And I think it represents about 20 million adult Kenyans, okay? And the same thing for the other regions that you see there, where you see that Rift Valley has the highest percentage, And then you see that, Northeastern there has 5%. We, then went to 24 out of the 47 counties. We don't necessarily have to go to all the counties because it is sampling. But then you do see that then we tried to cherry pick all the counties that would represent the regions well. So for coast, we went to Mombasa, Kwale, Kilifi. Northeastern, we went to Garissa. And then in Eastern, we covered Isiolo, Embu, Machakos, and Kitui. So that is lower, upper Eastern, all covered. And then in Central, we covered Nyeri, Kirinyaga, Kiambu. In Rift, which is the largest county and region, the largest region, we see that we covered West Pokot, we covered Nandi, we covered Uasin Gishu, Nakuru, Narok, Kericho. So North Rift, Central Rift, and South Rift. And then you also see that in Western, we covered Kakamega, Bungoma, Busia. And then for Nyanza, we covered Kisumu, Homa Bay, and Kisii. And of course, Nairobi was covered on its own because it's a large county, and you can see there that it samples 150. So let's start off with the direction the country is taking. Is it headed in the wrong direction, in the right direction, or is it, neither headed in the right or wrong direction, or you just don't know? And what you see is most Kenyans, 48%, feel that the country is headed still in the wrong direction, with only 34% saying that the country is headed in the right direction. And then there are about 14% who are saying neither right or wrong direction. If we look at it by region, then you will see that those regions that feel very strongly that the country is headed in the wrong direction are, first and foremost, Western, where we have 57% of those in Western saying the country is definitely headed in the wrong direction. And then Nairobi, where 51% feel that the country is headed in the wrong direction. If we look at the right direction, then we've seen this consistently over the past, couple of years, that Northeastern tends to register, especially since devolution, tends to register high incidence of the country feeling that the country is going in the right direction. And you can see that there are 47% of those in Northeastern say the country is headed in the right direction. It's neither headed in the wrong or right direction. You see that the highest incidence for that is in Central. Quickly go through the other regions. Let me start off with coast. 48% of the coast feel the country is headed in the wrong direction, while 30% right direction. But we also see that 38% feel that it's headed in the wrong direction. What about Eastern? Nearly half, 49%, feel that it's headed in the wrong direction. And only 29% feel that it's headed in the right direction. In Rift Valley as well, we see that 45% feel the country is headed in the wrong direction. 39% feel it's headed in the right direction. And even in Nyanza, we have 46% saying it's headed in the wrong direction, and only 39% feeling it's headed in the right direction. What I have put there for you is a trend analysis that shows you from February 2017 to date, the trends of how the country has been feeling in terms of the direction the country is taking. And you see that in February 2017, we registered a high of 55% of the country feeling the country was headed in the wrong direction. There was heavy, politicking, campaigning had started, and the environment was generally poisoned with, high-octane politics. But if you look at, the environment thereafter, in June 2017, it was still 50%, feeling it's headed in the wrong direction. Look at July. It was still 49%. And then it dipped in May 2018 and August 2018, where it was at, 28%. And I guess you know why that happened in 2018, yes? It was the handshake, yeah? So just after the handshake, we see that people start feeling that the country is headed in the right direction, and you see 52% there saying the country is headed in the right direction. There were great hopes that things were going to change, and I think there were expectations. But we went right back, so that by December, 51% of us in the country were feeling that the country was back again headed in the wrong direction. And right now in June, it's not changed too much. 48% of the country still feels that we're headed in the wrong direction, right? What are the reasons for us feeling? And the main reason for those who feel, the 34% who feel the country is headed in the right direction, is peace. There's peace in the country, but there's also a small percentage, 16%, who say the country is doing well economically. They feel that we have good infrastructure, that the government is actively fighting corruption, as mentioned by 12%, and that the government and the opposition are working well together, as is mentioned by another 12%. Education has improved, as mentioned by 11%, and that devolution is making a difference. So those are the main ones we can see there as the reasons why the country is going in the right direction. But the overwhelming one is that there is peace, as you see by about 50%. Let's look at it, in terms of trends. What were the reasons that people gave in August, in December, and June? August last year, December last year, and June now. We still see the same thing, peace. Peace is the overriding thing across the board. We see that in August, 56% felt, that the country was peaceful. Same thing in December, and again, in June 2019. Is it the same for people across the regions? Well, we see that the reason for feeling that the country is headed in the right direction is high. The highest reason for that in Nairobi is peace. The highest reason in Nyanza is peace, as is the case in Eastern and Northeastern, where we're registering about 60% in terms of the reason the country is doing well. But we also see that, the second reason, which is the economy is doing well, is registered high in the coast. We also see it's registering high in Rift Valley at 21%, at least comparatively to other reasons given. We see that economy is doing well, is registering high in those two areas. Right. We saw that 48% this June and 51% before that, the period we analyzed before that, said that the country is going in the wrong direction. So over the past year, most people have actually felt the country is going in the wrong direction. And why is it? It's generally because of the economy and the high cost of living. People are feeling that they are not earning enough to actually afford to live, a relatively comfortable life. But you also see that the second reason they give as feeling that the country is headed in the wrong direction is rampant corruption. So whilst we have seen government and other agencies like DPP and the courts and the DCI, increase the impetus in fighting corruption, Kenyans still feel that rampant corruption is one of the reasons why the country is headed in the wrong direction. Maybe the message there to the people who are concerned is that impetus should increase. The efforts should be, bolstered, so that we can see more happening. And maybe if that happens, then it may reduce the high cost of living. We see that in countries like Nigeria, what the president has been trying to do now is to repatriate funds and bring money back. I don't know whether you read about money that was in hundreds of millions of dollars that was found in a UK flat and actually repatriated to the country. Money that was belonging to politicians. And I think that's probably what we are also trying to do as a country, perhaps with some of the initiatives that we are seeing, like the new currencies in circulation. The third reason why people feel that the country is headed in the wrong direction is obviously unemployment, which is linked to bad economy and poor governance, bad politics. So we see that the top 5 reasons that people feel the country is headed in the wrong direction, first of all, is life is difficult. People can't actually afford to earn their keep and survive with what they're earning. Inflation is high, the cost of goods, cost of living is too high for your typical Kenyan. Probably for all of us sitting in this room, we're feeling it is difficult to survive a lot more than it was maybe a couple of years ago. So that's why 55% are saying that. And we're linking it to the fact that there is things that need to be done better. The country needs to be governed better. And so you see that, a third of us are saying there is still rampant corruption. What are we going to do about corruption? And we can link that to poor governance that is mentioned by 10%. And then, of course, we see about 20% mentioning unemployment as the reason why they feel the country is going in the wrong direction. And every time we switch on our TVs or our radios or read the newspaper, you will agree with us that what you're sharing with us as a media is a lot of things that are synonymous with bad politics. It's high-octane politics. And that is probably why, you see people saying that there. If we look at the trends between August of last year and now, then we see that in August of last year, the main issue that was, causing the country to go in the wrong direction was rampant corruption. So 58% then in August 2018 said the main reason was rampant corruption. Then, of course, you remember that there are a lot of things were, started getting done after the handshake in terms of, fighting this vice. And we then switched so that by December of last year, 66% of us were saying the reason why the country was going in the wrong direction was high cost of living. So you've started fighting corruption, but we're not feeling it in our pockets. We're not feeling it in terms of the reduction in cost of living. So inflation is still very high and high cost of living is high. And have things changed much? Well, it's reduced by 10% in terms of the reasons people are giving. So 55% now saying that the country is still headed in the wrong direction because of high cost of living. So you see that the reasons are more or less the same. They seem to switch, but the two main reasons why people feel the country is headed in the wrong direction are the cost of living and corruption. Who's responsible for the decline? Well, the president takes credit. So for the 34% who feel the country is headed in the right direction, it's because of the president. So 55% say that. And then the second lot, which is 17%, say it's both the president and the opposition leader, Raila. And another 7% mention that it's both the president and his deputy, William Ruto. But overwhelmingly, the reason why people feel the country is headed in the right direction is due to the efforts of the president. Yeah? You will then not be surprised that similarly, the reason why who is responsible for the wrong direction the country is taking, well, the buck stops with the president. And so you see, it is all political leaders who are responsible. And then we see both, if there's goodwill for us to actually start feeling a relief in terms of the high cost of living, he needs to actually take some action. He needs to make some tough decisions. And of course, we have the political leaders, hence the question on Parliament. Because when we have Parliament doing its job well on our behalf, then we would actually see laws being put in place that will ensure that that feeling that we have that there is high cost of living may be reduced. So what then are the key issues of concern today to Kenyans? We asked them, could you mention the one most pressing issue of concern to you today as a Kenyan? And you see that 30%, 29%, almost a third, mention unemployment. So it's a big issue. And the government needs to actually come up with initiatives to ensure that, this issue of unemployment is dealt with. Otherwise, the social crimes and the social ills that we're seeing will continue to bedevil us. We then also see that high cost of living is number 2 key issue of concern. And the third one is corruption. Then it is followed by insecurity and crime at 5% and food security. So 2 core areas are bothering us. One is the economy and how the economy is handled to ensure that we have employment and that the cost of living is actually affordable to all Kenyans, that we all have a decent standard of living and can afford the basic necessities of life. And the second one is that when we pay tax, you actually use our tax well. So So our tax is not squandered by, ill-meaning Kenyans. And that is why corruption is still the third most, important issue of concern to most Kenyans. And do you see that has changed over the period? If we look at August 2018, we compare it to December 2018 and then June 2019, we see that two things interchange, or three things interchange. So in August, the three most important issues of concern to Kenyans were unemployment, we saw corruption, and high cost of living, almost sharing the same at 22, 21, 23%. Then in December, the high cost of living went up to 24% and was first most important issue, followed by unemployment at 23% and corruption at 18%. And now we see that unemployment, high cost of living, and corruption are still the three most important issues. I don't know what message that sends to government. If not, things need to change a bit more. We can't keep on giving the same issues of concern year in, year out and not see changes. Yeah. Are we satisfied with the 3.02 trillion budget that we have now, we will have to all finance as taxpayers? Absolutely not. So 58% of Kenyans were not satisfied with the recently, released 2019-2020 budget. Only 17% of us were actually satisfied with what has been, passed as our budget for the next financial. CS Rotich shared with us as our new. 51% are not satisfied with what the budget is the proposed budget or the budget that was passed. In Northeastern, 44% are not satisfied. In Eastern, 49% are not satisfied. Central, 62% not satisfied. Rift Valley, 58%. Western, 62%. Nyanza, 60%. And Nairobi, an overwhelming 68%. Almost 3/4 of those in Nairobi were not satisfied with the budget. Why? Well, first of all, what we are saying is tax on goods such as maize, milk, fuel, the essentials, the things that would make the cost of living lower, were not reduced. So therefore, for us, we therefore link it and say, well, our standard of living is going to still be difficult. Maisha is going to continue to be hard. Then there were 15% who said, that now that border riders will be required to have insurance for passengers, etc., that will also mean that those of us who actually use this as a source of transport will have to fork out more. Yeah? Then, I know nobody here is worried about number 3 because you're all teetotalers, but there was also 4% who actually mentioned that the tax on wines, spirits, cigarettes has been increased and they're not happy about that. Yeah? And then there is, the proposed, issue by government to remove the cap on interest caps on bank loans. People are not happy about that. And then also the fact that we don't quite know yet what, county revenue budgets are going to be because the Senate and National Assembly are yet to agree. And then there was a percentage that talked about, of course you don't do this, but 1% were also not happy about sport bets, betting, betika, etc., and all that, the tax on betting. Yeah. So, when all these things are happening, we always sometimes ask ourselves, who's going to watchdog government? For us to actually have a society or an environment where we feel we are covered, we give government the tools and the instruments to govern on our behalf. We as the people, we give government. But we also then give the opposition the power and the responsibility to check and ensure that there are checks and balances on government. So that is why we have this system of democracy that we have. And so then we ask, because majority are saying that the country is headed in the wrong direction, who speaks then? Who ensures that the person who's responsible for ensuring the country is headed in the right direction, and we've said that is the executive, who will then speak for Kenyans? And in a typical environment, that should be the opposition, right? So we then ask, the role of the opposition in a country is to hold the government of the day accountable. Yeah? Do you think the opposition in Kenya is performing its role? And you see that most Kenyans, 44%, do not think the opposition is actually performing its role. Another 31% went on to say, well, there is no opposition. So they're not performing their role because they are no longer the opposition. And then we have only a quarter of Kenyans feeling that the opposition is doing its role. And if we look at it by region, then we see that at the coast, majority don't feel the opposition is doing its job. In northeastern, 49% don't feel it's doing its job. In eastern, 45%. Central, 45% don't feel the opposition is doing its job. In Rift Valley, we have 39% who don't feel that the opposition is doing its job, but also 34% in Rift Valley say, well, there is no opposition. And in Western, 42% feel that opposition is not doing its job, and another 31% say there is no opposition. In Nyanza, 40% feel that the opposition is not doing its job, but another 26% say there's no opposition. And it's the same thing in Nairobi, where almost 50% say, no, the opposition is not doing its job. And certainly 34% in Nairobi say there's no opposition. Okay? So then we get the overall that we mentioned before. And so if there is no opposition, or the opposition is not doing its job, we then asked, well, what party do you feel closest to right now? Yep. And then you see that looking at today, thinking of today, which political party do you feel closest to? Well, Jubilee is certainly the most popular party at 40%. We then have ODM, which is the second most popular party, having lost a lot of ground, is standing right now at 21%. And then we have Wiper at 3%, ANC at 2%, Ford Kenya at 1%, and then there are those who feel close to no party. And those stand at 28%. Right? And if we look at it by region, then we see, let us look at where Jubilee is actually strong. We see is strong in Central with 61% popularity, in Rift Valley with 57% popularity, and then it has 27% popularity in Western, 24 in Nyanza, 23 in Nairobi, and right now at the coast, surprisingly, because coast was originally ODM zone, we see that Jubilee is standing at 33% at the coast. And in Eastern, is also standing at 39% popularity. What about ODM? ODM has lost ground at the coast, where it used to, traditionally 3/4 of those at the coast would tell you they're ODM diehards. Now ODM is only at 33% popularity. In Northeastern, ODM has 22% popularity. In Eastern, ODM only has 10% popularity. It has 7% in Central. And look at Western. Western was ODM's stronghold. It only has 25% popularity in Western right now. It has 12% popularity in Rift Valley. And then even in Nyanza, which is the bedrock of ODM, ODM has popularity of 47%. And then in Nairobi, ODM has 27% popularity. If we look at Wiper, then we see that Wiper is at 1% at the coast, 4% in Northeastern, and generally it's mainly in Eastern, where it has, its stronghold at 14%. So it's still weaker than Jubilee in Eastern at 14%. What about Amani? Amani registers popularity in Western, but it is not as strong as both ODM and Jubilee in Western, who have 27 and 25 respectively. ANC has only 6% popularity. Ford Kenya also, like ANC, has 6% popularity in Western. We don't see much else for them anywhere else. And then, the others were really not mentioned that much. There were insignificant mentions of the other political parties. Don't believe in any party, and you see that we run across the board with our, mean of 28%. So in a nutshell, I've generally finished. In a nutshell, what are we saying? We're saying, one, the country is still headed in the wrong direction. 48% of Kenyans don't feel the country is headed in the right direction. The main reason why the country is felt to be headed in the wrong direction is the high cost of living, unemployment, and the third reason is rampant corruption. So the issues to do with fighting corruption still need to actually be, heightened. When we look at the budget, it's 3.02 trillion shillings that government is meant to spend on our behalf, using our taxes in any case. And we're not happy about it. So majority of us are not satisfied with the budget that was read. The question then is how that budget is expedited in a manner that there is no pilferage, that we don't start hearing in the next year that most of that money went into people's pockets one way or another. The third thing that we have seen is that right now there is who is responsible for the right or wrong direction the country is taking. The buck stops with the president. And so, high cost of living, corruption, unemployment, whilst we have parliament that is meant to legislate, I think giving the right direction and setting the trend and momentum is a role that the president needs to continue playing. People seem to be very happy. Those who feel the country is headed in the right direction seem to be very happy that he is, spearheading that which is making them happy, like economic development, peace, etc. But also in the same breath, the issues that lead to us feeling the country is headed in the wrong direction are also stopping just at his, footstep. So who is responsible there again? It is him. So when 48% say we are not happy, we are really calling upon the president to, do whatever is necessary to ensure that we can live a semblance of quality life as Kenyans, which we are not doing right now. Life is difficult for many of us. Apart from the president, there is also the watchdog that is meant to ensure that government is kept in check. And what many of Kenyans are saying is the watchdog is asleep. The watchdog is not doing its job. The watchdog has resigned from its role. So there is no opposition right now. And we can actually see the effects of them not doing their role due to the reduced popularities for the opposition parties. ODM currently standing at 21%, a party that traditionally used to enjoy 50 to 70% popularity. Jubilee Party at 40% is a party in power. Could they perhaps have more? But if we just focus on the opposition parties, we have Wiper that is not even doing that great in its own stronghold of Eastern with 14% popularity. We see Amani and Ford Kenya, other strong parties in Western, who are also only registering 6% each. So can the opposition wake up and start doing its role in terms of playing the watchdog role that we mandate them to play for us as a citizenry? I think that is all that we have for you this Sunday.